September 2013, the FDA released their final rule after many years of looking at this initiative, requiring most medical devices distributed in the United States. It could be manufactured anywhere around the world, but distributed in the United States carry a unique device identifier, or known as the UDI. Now, this is a phased implementation over the various classes that we'll talk about. Really, the initiative by the FDA is to reduce the time and effort for clerical administration wrapped around new product introductions, and really to enhance greater public safety. And in some regards, it's been a model for other countries as they adopt a UDI type initiative as well. So the second bullet, the UDI ruling are timeline based, which we'll get into in a couple of slides. They're based on the product classification from Class 3 being first. With that, typically a Class 3 device typically must be approved by the FDA before they're marketed, and also being the highest risk devices. They started with Class 3 devices with compliancy September of this year, Class 2 to follow, and then Class 1. So as part of this UDI system, the FDA has created a repository, a database called the Global Unique Device Identification Database. It's a mouthful. It's also referred to as the GUDID, or the Good ID for short. And really, it's a repository which includes a basic set of identifying elements for each device with a UDI. This Good ID, once it's fully deployed, will be made available to the public and any other industry entity to query information about medical devices, whether they're on the supply side or the consumption side. And it'll be a centralized repository that will be accessible through the FDA through a website, as well as through automated interfaces, which will be talked about later on. So what is a UDI? This is really important. A UDI consists of really two elements, two parts. First being the device identifier, or DI, and the production identifier, also known as the PI. And these are the industry terms with the UDI. So the PI is basically a static instance of a product. It could be a catalog number, a product number, those complying with other initiatives, other registries. It also could be a GTIN, a UPN, an ISBT 128. But basically, it's a static portion of a unique product that is marketed and distributed throughout the United States. So when you combine a DI and a TI together, you get a UDI, and that's a unique occurrence, a unique instance of a Class 3, 2, or 1 product in the supply chain. And obviously the DI is a mandatory part of that, and the TI is a variable portion. So a very important point to make is that the Good ID is only storing DI information. It does not store PI, or production information. You will not have the requirement to upload all your production information of things like your batch or lot numbers, your production dates, expiration dates, serial numbers. Really, instance-specific information is not part of the Good ID. So, where do you start as a device manufacturer? You really have to register. There's 3 issuing agencies, which we'll talk about here shortly, that have been authorized or accredited issuing agencies by the FDA to issue the assignment of UDI company prefixes, so that those device manufacturers can be compliant and start their roadmap with the UDI system. Next slide, please. Okay, so just some challenges or impact of the medical device industry. You have really a matrix here of challenges and benefits. And again, with any initiative where there's a lot of disparate data that needs to be collected and put in one spot, there's that collection, conversion, submission of the UDI data to the Good ID. That has to be put together. There's timely approval of all UDI data through internal auditing processes. If you look at the bullets in there, creating new submissions, update submissions, developing record keeping, all these challenges are really wrapped around today the lack of a central repository of medical device data. that has visibility and transparency to the various stakeholders, both the manufacturers, the demand side, and provide transparency. So that was really the initiative, is to take these challenges with this good ID, this global repository of information, to provide the benefits you see on the right-hand side. And that is, effective medical device recalls with all the products, eventually starting with Class 3 to Class 1 being out there. Subscribers, individuals can come in and see when was a product released to the market, what are its attributes, what are its packaging sizes, etc. And it can be queried in a number of ways. So we're looking at really the same initiative that was done for those of you that may be familiar with global data synchronization, which was meant to link together supply side and demand side companies. This is a similar initiative to make that information available. And by doing so, it provides a single source of information for public and health professionals. So big picture there on the impact of the medical device industry. Next slide, please. All right, so issuing agencies, I mentioned earlier, right now currently there's 3 issuing agencies, GS1, HIBIC, and ICABA or ICC BBA, that will basically issue a unique identifier for a labeler, and GS1 being one of the bigger ones with their global trade item number. Currently, a device identifier is issued a GLN, global location number, and with GS1, and that is the beginning of them to create GTINs, or global trade item number. Brand owners and manufacturers must allocate and maintain their GTINs according to the rules of the FDA UDI mandate and GS1 standards. So UDI realizes that there are standards bodies out there already today with these 3 you see here. And so they're supporting their numbering conventions so that when a device labeler registers with the FDA as a UDI, they will specify, I'm compliant with either the GS1 standard of numbering systems or the HIB-CC codes, my UPNs, or ICC BBA. So those 3 are the ones that are supported. So you've got to be in one of those 3 buckets. There is a 4th agency coming on. It's a very large standards organization that will also be an issuing agency to help connect device labelers to the good ID using their numbering system, or their numbering standards. So that's sort of the landscape on issuing agencies. Again, if there's a 4th one coming on board, there might be some more that come in the future. The next slide, please. Thank you. So timelines and details. This sort of puts it in perspective from 2013 on to 2020. Here we are right now with the FDA UDI. Class 3 is right now ongoing in September of 2014. Again, Class 3 devices, require the most work. The typical products would be pacemakers, pulse generators, diagnostic equipment, external defibrillators, et cetera. Moving on to Class 1 and Class 2 medical devices. Class 2 being such as wheelchairs or single-use scalpels, et cetera. So they're moving from Class 3, Class 2, Class 1. You see the timeline going out to 2018, which is a Class 1 non-class, a little bit confusing. And then in parallel with that, there's also the direct part marketing going from 2015 up to 2020. So again, it's a phased deployment starting with the highest risk devices, Class 3, moving to Class 1. And Class 1 could be as simple as a bandage, tongue depressor, or something a little bit more benign. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'd like to pass it over to the organizer.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So hi, I am Prasanna here. So I'll be taking you through a few slides here, which will talk about the GoDid components. The GoDid database is a centralized repository of key device identification information. It contains only the DI information. The PI information is not submitted or stored in the GoDid database. The production identification or the PI attributes that would be printed on the product label needs to be submitted. It contains only the yes or no flags to indicate which PI attributes like the manufacturing date or the expiry date, serial number, lot number or batch number, or DIN number in case of human cell tissue based products are present on the device label. The GoDid account user information is not made public at this point. The device attribute information can be submitted through two ways. One, using the web interface of FDA. The second one through HL7 SPL submission through ESG gateway. The next step is you require a GoDid account which needs to be created by FDA. This account is independent of the method of submission you choose to submit your DI information to the GoDid. The web interface provided by FDA has the option for manual data entry and the submission to the GoDid from there. In the HL7 SPL submission process, the XML needs to be created and validated by the labeler, and then it can be submitted through the ESG gateway. The labeler will need to keep a track of acknowledgements of the DIs that are submitted. This method is more feasible for the submissions if there are more number of submissions to be made. Now next, coming to the next point, the responsibility of complying with the UDI ruling lies with the labeler. A labeler can be a manufacturer or a reseller. Third-party labelers can help a labeler to comply with the UDI ruling. These third-party labelers need to be authorized by the labeler by a process of linking the third-party labeler's DUNS number with the labeler's DUNS number. Moving to the next slide. Now let's briefly talk about the steps for the GoDid compliance. This year, many of the class 3 device manufacturers applied for the extension and they will need to comply by September 2015. Now all the implantable life support and life sustaining device manufacturers also need to comply by September 2015. This implies that there would be a lot of inquiries and GoDid account opening requests for FDA. In one of the webinars that was conducted by FDA, they clearly mentioned the exponential rise in the GoDid account creation requests and clarification tickets during the months of August and September 2014. So this indicates that a lot of people try to comply with this GoDid norm at the end stage. So, and the response time by the FDA to answer each of the queries is delayed. So in order to avoid such issues, the labelers need to gear up and probably start the process at the earliest. So in this way, they can avoid being delayed in the submission process or in the account creation process. The first step towards the GoDid compliancy is to get a GoDid account set up by the FDA. So as I told earlier in the previous slide, that this is independent of the method of submission opted by the labeler. Once this is done, the labeler needs to request for a test account. That is either for the web interface or the HL7 SPL submission method. Then they need to complete all the test scenarios outlined in the UDI guidance. These test submissions done by the labelers are reviewed by the FDA, and they would request for all the different scenarios which the labeler would encounter. Only when the successful submission of all these things happen, the FDA would then activate the production account. So the bottom line is the entire process is time consuming, and again stressing on the point that the labelers need to gear up at the earliest. So if you look at the slide here, so the last 4 bullet points, it will show the exact way in which you can comply with the GOODID compliance. So moving on to the next slide. I hope the screen is refreshed now. Yeah. So in this slide, we have shown here all the 62 different attributes that are submitted to the GOODID database. All these 62 attributes are categorized into different buckets, like commercial distribution or the latex information or the direct marking requirements, storage and handling, then clinically relevant size. So as you can see, there are different categories and groups here. And in these 62 attributes, there are 5 such attributes which are auto-populated. One such thing is the this one, DUNS number. So when you select the DUNS number, the company name and the physical address is auto-populated. The DUNS number is linked in the FDA's website with the registered address. Similarly, the commercial distribution status is mandated by the commercial distribution end date. So there are a few more parameters here which are auto-populated based on some other parameter which is submitted. Moving on. So, Alan?
Yes, thank you, Prasanna. Next slide, please. Okay, master data management, master data distribution. If you look at the typical enterprise today, you could have data scattered around in different departmental areas. Your ERP system can have product information. You can have data in your labeling department, your process engineering. The regulatory group can own certain attributes of that device information. The legal group might have specific data elements, or they may be reviewing certain parts of those DI attributes. Sales and marketing has a hand in the rollout or submission of that product to the market, as well as the different packaging attributes, which are critically important. So if you look today, part of the challenge is that this information is typically dispersed amongst multiple departments and individuals, and that needs to be brought together in a cohesive data set for UDI submission. And again, the file formats and databases go anywhere from a highly structured ERP, product lifecycle management, all the way down to Excel sheets and/or paper-based documents. All these bits of information, these various attributes, need to be identified and thought through as bringing together all the required attributes for a proper and validated submission to the UDI Good ID database. As part of that, it's also addressing controlled vocabularies so that a certain attribute, such as a packaging size or a release date to the market, it has the same naming convention or meaning throughout the enterprise. And again, controlled vocabularies, relabeling those data elements to UDI standards. Next slide, please. So the three really areas here, master data management and formatting, and then your final submission. Master data management is really, again, bringing together data from disparate systems and databases. Where is it now? How is it maintained? Is it correct? Basically putting the fence around the collection, aggregation, and refinement of the required data for UDI submission. The second step, formatting format readiness management, preparing the product and regulatory data in the required format. That's basically also known as data scrubbing, and applying that data to the UDI validation business rules. Is this compliant with the business rules of the GUDA database? And as a side note, it is not that complex. There's basic, validations to make sure the data is conforming. Acquiring the FDA good ID data elements, your DUNS, your GMDN, product characteristics, packaging information, getting that all ready for submission. Once you're ready with that and you've got your data, basically a tight fence around that, it's past the level 1 or level 2 check, is now getting on board with the good ID, and then submitting that through HL7 SPL, which is structured product labeling, submitting that and doing XML conversion underneath the covers and submitting that as per HL7 and Part 11 standards. And basically, as a result of that, if I submit 50 products, I will get validation reports coming back and giving the status of if there's any errors. They can be sent back to the device labelers. Many errors can be addressed or corrected. So really 3 steps: identifying where your data is, bring it together to meet the requirements of UDI, scrubbing it, and then submitting it. And next slide, please. So we just thought there's some recent updates. This is obviously an initiative that's still moving, and they're still getting feedback from industry as a whole. I won't read all the individual line items off, but it just shows that this is a living, breathing repository as more device manufacturers and device labelers come on board and provide feedback. They're fine-tuning the business rules and the overall process. And you can see things anywhere from simple unit of measures to date formats. A couple things of note. Back on August 20th, the FDA had a webinar based on the number of queries they were getting. And they produced an FAQ document. So again, trying to summarize the amount of data and maybe some misinformation about the UDI and publishing that to the general public. That last bullet there, I'm sorry, the third to last bullet on the unique device identification system for small entity compliance guidance. So there's a lot of small entities that are manufacturing very important but low volume class 3 products, and as an example, some of them have a very small needle or very small implantable device which they cannot label or do direct marking. So the FDA has provided guidance on how they can comply in different ways. So these are the things that Freyr, being part of this initiative, is keeping very close to all this new information that's coming through as a result of implementations and fine-tuning their process to onboard medical device labelers with the good ID. I'll pass that over now. Next slide. Rajiv.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks everyone again for joining. I'll take you through what Freyr can offer in terms of an end-to-end value when it comes to the UDI space. Next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. So if you look at the UDI landscape of any organization, typically in terms of UDI readiness, organizations vary in terms of their current landscape. So some of the organizations that we work with are pretty evolved. Some of them are still in the early stages. So typically what we can do is Freyr can come in and do a gap assessment of your current state from a landscape perspective. So this includes the systems part of it, the process part of it, and the entire data and information workflow part of it. As we are all aware, UDI data can come from a single data source or multiple data sources, or even disparate sources like Excel sheets and custom built applications and so on. So we can come in and do a gap assessment. That's a part of our consulting portfolio. Once we do a gap assessment, we then move into the right strategy for an implementation approach. And the implementation again could be a technology-based solution. And the technology could be either a commercial off-the-shelf solution, which Freyr has its own. It's called Freyr Identity. Or it could be an enhancement to the existing platform that might be available, like PLM tools or ERP solutions. And once we identify the implementation plan, we then go in for the actual implementation of submitting to the GODID, either automated or manual or a combination of two. And upon successful submission of the information, we then move on to the lifecycle management. When the device attributes change or the production identifier has to be updated on an ongoing basis, it can be done through a system perspective, or it can be done through a process perspective. So we can support end-to-end. To simplify this, we can offer services either in any one or all of the buckets that you're seeing here. Next slide, please. Yeah, this goes a little deeper into the different dimensions of our UDI Center of Excellence. On the left side, you see the solution, the software. It's Freyr Identity. It's a cloud-based platform. It can also be installed on-premise. Very simple, easy solution that is built ground up from a regulatory perspective, using latest rich internet application architecture. And on the top part of this wagon wheel, you see the strategy and consulting services, where we come in and do the systems, process, and data or information workflow consulting part of it. And we can also take a more operational role if your existing UDI strategy is clear and you have all your internal assessments done. We can play a pure operational support role in terms of data cleansing, data transformation, data upload to the GODID database, and thereby the maintenance thereafter. The last but not the least is regulatory intelligence. We can support in providing constant guidance and insights on how the UDI landscape is changing and how it would impact your product portfolio in terms of some of the nuances, either in terms of product classification changes or deadline changes or other internal aspects that we are aware being part of the industry forums and so on. So we can provide ongoing regulatory intelligence from a UDI context. And we can also support you from a global perspective, as the UDI mandate is going global. Many countries are trying to adopt the UDI standards in their own flavor, in their own variations as we speak. So we can definitely support you from a global perspective as well. So that summarizes how Freyr can support in one or more service or solution lines when it comes to UDI. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a quick snapshot of our technology solution. As I mentioned, it's called Freyr Identity, and it primarily can support you from an XML conversion perspective, either transforming it through an SPL approach or a HL7 approach. And it also has an inbuilt validator that can validate the converted files against the GODID standards, and eventually it can submit to the ESG. The interesting thing is there's also a version management. So once the submission is done, in terms of lifecycle maintenance of the data model, can be done very easily using the system. And we offer a comprehensive training and 24/7 support for the solution as well. Next slide, please. Just to summarize the discussions, we'll move on to QA after this. I just wanted to summarize and introduce Freyr to everyone. We are one of the fastest growing full service regulatory consulting and operations company. We are primarily based out of 3 locations in New Jersey in US. We have offices near London in Maidenhead, and in India we're in Hyderabad. We're an ISO 9001 and ISO 27001 certified organization. Probably the only organization that has both the certifications from a regulatory perspective. And our exclusive focus is global regulatory solutions and services. And we are a team of about 350 plus strong. And we do work with several large clients in medium to large scale regulatory programs, including some of the Fortune 50 pharma, biotech, medical device, and generic organizations. We have a large portfolio of small and medium companies as well as our customers. Next slide, please. Beyond UDI, there is quite a few capabilities within the organization, which is summarized in the Center of Excellence slide. We offer different service capabilities within regulatory, like publishing, affairs, labeling and artwork. We have a whole host of regulatory information management solutions, like your product registration management and so on and so forth. We have specific focus on regulatory intelligence as a pioneering area for us, which again encompasses solutions, consulting capabilities, operational services, and resource fulfillment. With that, we come to the end of the presentation part of the webinar. The floor is now open for Q&A. I will hand over to Ranvijay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rajiv, Prasanna, and Alan, for taking time out to do this session. We have received a couple of questions, and I'll take the first one, which is a more common question which has been asked, which is whether Freyr will be providing a copy of the slides and the audio for this session to its delegates. So the answer is yes. Freyr will be providing a copy of the slides and the audio to all the delegates, and please be on the lookout for an email which will come your way with details, for accessing those. Some of the other questions which we have received, and I will take them sequentially, and just to let everyone know, if in case we run out of time, before responding to all the questions, we will definitely send a written response to all the delegates. So I am going on the first question, which I think is for Prasanna and Alan, and the question is, how will Freyr be able to assist in activating a GUDID account? So over to Alan.
Yes, sorry, just on mute there for a second. So, yeah, so how will Freyr assist in activating the Good Idea account? Really start off with Freyr will send a request to the FDA on behalf of the labeler for a Good ID test account. That's where you start. So they can validate that each labeler is compliant with submission. We'll complete the submission of all the different possible test scenarios as required by the FDA via the ESG gateway. That's the FDA electronic gateway on behalf of the client. And then finally, Freyr will request, once they pass those test case scenarios, they will request activation of a production Good ID account. And from that point forward, the labeler can now start publishing production DI, device information, to the Good ID. Hopefully that addressed that one.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. We have another question, which I think, again, I would direct this to Prasanna. The question is, if we choose to submit on FDA GUID directly, do we need to conduct any validations of our product data entered, or is it that only for XML HL7 submissions method? So over to Prasanna.
Yeah. Thanks, Ranvijay. Yeah, in both the methods, we will have to conduct all the test cases. We'll have to run the test scenarios as mandated by the GUID guidance. And once we have done all the testing, we will have to submit the core IDs of those test scenarios to the FDA. And FDA will review those core IDs, and then based on their judgment, they would either ask us to do more testing on different scenarios, or they would approve us to for the production account.
All right. Thank you, Prasanna, for taking that question. I think there's one more which I think is for you. And the question is how to submit data to FDA submittal gateway.
Okay. So I think the question here is to, I'm assuming that it must be for the ESG gateway here. So as I mentioned earlier during the presentation, that for this one HL7 SPL submission, we will need to request for ESG account, and that again goes through the test account, and then production account would be activated. So here also we will need to submit all the test scenarios through the ESG gateway, and then once it is approved, all these core IDs needs to be sent to the FDA. Again, the FDA would approve it and then allow us to do the production submissions.
All right, thank you so much. There's one which so the other question which I have, and I will leave it between Prasanna and Alan to respond to this. So the question is, what is the advantage of using Freyr identity ESG over web interface?
Okay. So this I think we covered it briefly during our discussion there. So the Freyr identity basically would generate the validated XMLs. And as I was telling earlier, that this method is appropriate for somebody who is submitting large amount of data. So if somebody has about 5 or 6 or probably 10 submissions to make, so they can go with the FDA's web interface. Then if somebody has to go with more number of submissions, they can, using the Freyr's identity, they can clone the data or copy it and create new submissions. Like for example, we had one of our clients who were into the spinal cord implants, who had multiple components or part numbers which were similar but still need to be complied with. So in these kind of scenarios, there were about thousands of submissions to be done. So in these kind of scenario, going by the web interface would not help you to comply very quickly. So it's a time-consuming process. If you use any assisted tools like the Freyr identity, you can comply very quickly with that and with very much of ease.
Yeah, I just might add to Prasanna, just a segue there, is that the web interface with the good ID, it's very rudimentary. Yeah, again, it's one record at a time. It's not meant to do any type of high volume data submission. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you, Alan. There's one last question that we have, and that again I think is either you or Prasanna can take this. The question is, if the DI record is entered using HL7 SPL submissions, can I edit, update record using web interface?
So good question there. So initially when the Gooded account was published and it was open for users to start publishing the records, the interoperability was not there. So if somebody had submitted it through the HL7 ESG gateway, it was not available to be edited in the web interface. So there were a lot of queries regarding this to FDA, and FDA in one of its patches, it released this update, and now today currently, as per the current status of the Gooded environment, whichever way we submit, we can edit or update the data either way. If we submit the submissions using the ESG gateway, HL7 SPL, we can definitely edit it in the web interface of the FDA. and vice versa is also true. We can do that. So Alan, any comments on that?
No, I think you've covered it there.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Thank you so much, Alan and Prasanna, for taking the questions. With that, we reached, to the end of the Q&A session. Since there are no more questions coming in, I would, like to thank everyone, all the attendees and delegates, for taking the time out, from the busy schedule and making it over here. And we'll wrap this webinar. And I would like to just intimate everyone that the next series, the next part of the series is going to be scheduled for November 21st, and very shortly we will be sending out the invitations for that series also. So thank you once again, to the presenters and all the delegates for being a part of this webinar. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.